They made her wait 2 hours on a cold bench while couples in fancy clothes walked right past her. When the manager finally approached, he looked at her outfit and suggested she try somewhere more casual. He had no idea he was dismissing the woman who'd spent her life building the very menu he was so proud of. Her husband's restaurant, their recipes, and she had just been told she didn't belong. Helen Garrett stood in the marble-floored lobby of Marcello's, smoothing the front of her navy cardigan. The fabric was soft from years of washing, comfortable in the way old things become when they've been loved long enough. She'd paired it with her good slacks and the pearl earrings Richard had given her on their 20th anniversary. Simple, modest, the way she'd always dressed. Through the archway, she could see the dining room glowing with candlelight. White tablecloths, fresh flowers on every surface. The sound of silverware against china created a gentle music she'd known for 45 years. Her chest tightened with something between anticipation and grief. The hostess stand gleamed under recessed lighting. A young man in a crisp black suit stood behind it, scrolling through a tablet. He looked up as Helen approached, his smile professional and distant. "I have a reservation," Helen began. "Under Garrett?" He tapped the screen. His eyebrows drew together. "I'm not seeing anything under that name." Helen's fingers found the strap of her purse. "That's strange. I've been coming here every year for—" He was already looking past her, toward a couple entering behind her. The woman wore a black dress that probably cost more than Helen's monthly grocery budget. The man had silver hair and a watch that caught the light. "Just a moment," the young man murmured, stepping around Helen. "Right this way, Mr. Patterson. Your usual table is ready." Helen moved aside. She watched them glide through the archway, watched how the light seemed to welcome them. The restaurant had remodeled since her last visit. New paint, new fixtures. She wondered what else had changed. When the young man returned, his smile had thinned. "Ma'am, we're completely booked tonight. If you'd like to try calling ahead next time." "I did call," Helen interrupted gently. "2 weeks ago, I spoke with someone named Marcus." The young man, his name tag read Evan, checked his tablet again. He shook his head. "I'm not showing any reservation. And honestly, we're slammed. Maybe you could try Olive Garden? There's one about 2 miles. This is Marcello's," Helen breathed. "I know where I am." Evan's jaw tightened. "Then you know we require reservations." He glanced at her cardigan, her sensible shoes, her purse with the worn leather strap. "We have a dress code." Helen felt heat creep up her neck. Not embarrassment, something deeper, something that tasted like invisibility. "I'll wait," she offered, "in case there's a cancellation." Evan shrugged. "You can sit over there." He gestured toward a bench near the coat check, tucked away from the main entrance. "But I wouldn't get your hopes up." Helen sat. The bench was hard. From this angle, she could still see into the dining room, but only just. She watched couples arrive. Watched Evan greet them with warmth she hadn't received. Watched him check his tablet and nod and guide them through the archway like he was ushering them into heaven. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. Helen's hands rested in her lap, fingers laced together. She thought about Richard, about how he used to stand in the kitchen doorway of this very restaurant, flour dusting his apron, his eyes bright with whatever new dish he was perfecting, how he'd bring her samples on small white plates, watching her face as she tasted. "What do you think?" he'd ask. "Too much salt? Not enough?" And she'd close her eyes and really taste it. Feel the layers, the way the garlic played against the tomato, the freshness of the basil, the patience in the simmer. "More lemon," she'd suggest. "Just a touch." He'd grin. "That's my girl." They'd built the menu together. Not officially. She was never on payroll, never wore the chef's whites. But she'd been here. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, every Sunday afternoon. Tasting, adjusting, remembering her grandmother's techniques, her mother's intuition about when something needed sweetness or acid or time. The osso buco that critics raved about, that was her idea to add orange zest. The carbonara that people drove from 3 towns over to eat. She'd suggested the specific ratio of eggs to cheese after Richard's first version came out too thick. The tiramisu that had been featured in food magazines. She'd taught him her aunt's method of whipping the mascarpone. 2 hours crawled by. Helen's back ached from the hard bench. Her throat was dry. Through the archway, she could see the dining room beginning to thin as early diners finished their meals. She stood. Her knees protested slightly. She smoothed her cardigan again and walked back to the hostess stand. Evan looked up with poorly concealed irritation. "I was wondering," Helen started, her voice steady, "if perhaps a table has opened up now." Evan barely glanced at his tablet. Still nothing. "Like I said, we're booked solid." Helen could see empty tables from where she stood. 2 near the window. One in the corner that used to be Richard's favorite for staff meals. "I see open tables," she pointed out quietly. "Those are reserved," Evan snapped. "Look, ma'am." A man emerged from the dining room. Tall, mid-40s, dark suit that fit him like authority. He assessed the situation with a quick glance. Helen in her modest cardigan. Evan's exasperated expression. "Everything all right, Evan?" the man asked. "This woman has been waiting," Evan explained, his tone suggesting Helen was the problem. "She doesn't have a reservation, but she won't leave." The man turned to Helen. His smile was practiced. "I'm Marcus Chenoweth, the general manager. I'm sorry, but without a reservation, I simply can't accommodate you tonight." Helen met his eyes. "I called 2 weeks ago. I spoke with someone. I've been coming here for 45 years, and I've never needed—" Marcus held up a hand, cutting her off. The gesture was small, but unmistakable. Dismissive. The way you'd wave away a persistent fly. "Ma'am, I've been managing this restaurant for 6 months. I know our regulars." He let his gaze travel over her clothes, her sensible shoes, her purse. "Our regulars understand our standards." Something sharp lodged itself between Helen's ribs. "Perhaps," Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a confidential murmur, "you'd be more comfortable somewhere more casual. There are plenty of family-style places that don't require—" "This was my husband's restaurant," Helen interrupted. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Marcus's expression didn't change. "I'm sure it's very nice that you have memories here. But things change. Ownership changes. Standards change." He glanced toward the entrance, where another couple had just arrived. Designer clothes, confident postures, the kind of people who looked like they belonged in candlelight. "Evan," Marcus instructed, "please see these guests to table 12. Then he turned back to Helen. One last look. Not unkind exactly. Just done. "I think it's time for you to go," he suggested. Helen's hands trembled. She pressed them against her purse to still them. She wanted to explain, wanted to tell him about Richard's 30 years in the kitchen, about the recipes they'd created together, about how her handwriting was still in the original recipe book, tucked away in the office upstairs, if it was even still there. But Marcus had already turned away. Helen walked out into the cool evening. Behind her, the restaurant glowed like a memory she could no longer touch. 3 weeks passed like water. Helen tried not to think about Marcello's, tried to fill her days with gardening and grocery shopping and phone calls with her daughter in Portland. But the hurt sat in her chest like a stone. Then her phone rang on a Tuesday morning. "Helen?" The voice was creaky with age. "It's Vincent Marcello, the original owner, now in his late 80s, retired to Florida, visiting family up north only once or twice a year." Helen's breath caught. "Vincent." "I heard what happened," he rasped. His voice carried anger, but also something gentler. "Regret." "I'm in town for my grandson's graduation. I'd like you to come to the restaurant tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock. "Vincent, you don't have to—" Yes, he interrupted firmly. I do. Helen stood in front of her closet the next evening. She pulled out the same navy cardigan, the same good slacks, the same pearl earrings. She would not dress differently, would not pretend to be someone she wasn't. When she arrived at Marcello's, Vincent was waiting in the lobby, smaller than she remembered, frailer, but his eyes were still sharp, still kind. He took her hands in his. Helen Garrett. It's been too long. She smiled. 3 years. Too long, he repeated. Evan was at the hostess stand. His eyes widened when he saw them together. Vincent guided Helen through the archway. The dining room fell quiet as they entered. Staff looked up. Diners paused mid-conversation. Marcus appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. His confident stride faltered when he saw Vincent. Everyone, Vincent called out. His voice might have been old, but it carried. I want you to meet someone. Helen felt every eye in the restaurant turn toward her. This is Helen Garrett, Vincent announced. Her husband, Richard, was our head chef for 30 years. The best chef I ever had the privilege of working with. He built this restaurant's reputation. He created the menu you all know and love. Marcus had gone very still. But what most of you don't know, Vincent continued, is that Helen was Richard's partner in every sense. She tested every dish, adjusted every recipe. Half of what you serve, maybe more, came from her palate, her intuition, her knowledge. He turned to look at the menu board behind the bar. The osso buco with orange zest, the carbonara with the perfect ratio, the tiramisu that people travel for. Helen made those dishes what they are. Helen's eyes burned. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected to be named, to be seen. Vincent squeezed her hand. I'm sorry, he murmured. Just for her. I'm sorry you were treated like a stranger in the place you helped build. Marcus stepped forward. His face had lost all its color. His confident posture had collapsed into something smaller. Mrs. Garrett, he breathed. I didn't know. No, Helen agreed quietly. You didn't. He looked stricken, genuinely shaken. Not the practiced contrition of a man protecting his job, but real shame. I'm so sorry, he whispered. What I said to you, how I treated you. There's no excuse. Helen studied him, saw a man who'd been trying so hard to maintain standards, to prove himself worthy of managing a legendary restaurant, that he'd forgotten what actually made a place legendary. Not the marble floors or the dress code or the carefully curated guest list. The heart, the history, the people. You were protecting something you thought was valuable, Helen offered. That's not terrible. You just didn't know what was truly valuable here. Marcus swallowed hard. How do I make this right? Helen was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. Small, tentative. Let me come back, she suggested. Once a month, I'll consult on the menu. Help train your kitchen staff the way Richard trained them. Keep the recipes true to what they were meant to be. Marcus nodded quickly. Yes, absolutely. Whatever you want. Vincent gestured toward the dining room. Your table is waiting, Helen. The one Richard always kept for you. It was in the corner, by the window. Not the most prestigious table. Not the one celebrities requested. Just a quiet spot where you could watch the kitchen door and see the light spilling out when someone opened it. Helen sat down. The chair felt right, familiar, like coming home. Around her, the restaurant returned to its rhythm. Conversations resumed. Silverware clinked against china. Someone laughed. Vincent had returned to Florida by the time her food arrived, but Marcus brought the first course himself. The osso buco, perfectly plated, the orange zest visible in tiny flecks against the rich sauce. He set it down in front of her without a word, just a small nod, an acknowledgement. Helen picked up her fork, cut a small piece, brought it to her lips. She closed her eyes and tasted. Really tasted. The garlic, the tomato, the slow patience of the braise, and yes, there, the brightness of the orange zest, the way it lifted everything else. Just right, she murmured. When she opened her eyes, she could almost see Richard standing in the kitchen doorway, flour on his apron, eyes bright. "What do you think?" he'd ask. "Perfect," she'd answer. "It's perfect." And for the first time in 3 years, sitting in the restaurant they built together, Helen felt like she'd been given something she hadn't known she'd lost. Not revenge, not victory, just recognition, just being seen. The kitchen door swung open, spilling light across the dining room floor, and Helen smiled.